This is Get Real with Deb Waterbury, a show where Dr. Deb gets real as she teaches through books and studies on topics relevant for today. And now, here is your host, Dr. Deb Waterbury.
Well, welcome to our newest series called Intimacy. Actually, it's Finding Intimacy with God, Psalm by Psalm. You know, I've talked to so many people, and I deal with this too, understanding what it means to have an intimate relationship with God, with the creator of the universe. That can seem almost like it's untenable. That's something we just can't even get to. And understanding what intimacy with God looks like is tricky. And it's also something that I think that we all want. I mean, obviously, when you have a relationship with someone, you want to have intimacy with them. And you're understanding, first off, you know, we've kind of moved in a weird direction of that word intimacy. Intimacy literally just means knowing someone better than you've ever known anything else, or that you know everything about them. Like intimacy for me and my husband is not a physical relationship. That's a manifestation of the intimate relationship that we have. So it's finding intimacy with God is understanding that you know Him and He knows you, and that the relationship is that deep, and that deep abiding knowing. And I think that until we get to that, we get to understanding what real intimacy is with God, we're going to come up short in our hearts being knitted to His. It becomes more of either a brain-centered thing or a doing thing, as opposed to a heart thing when it comes to our relationships with God. So I thought it was really important that we spend, and we're going to spend the next 12 weeks talking about 12 different ways or methods by which we find intimacy with God. And we're going to do that in the Psalms. And most of the Psalms that we're going to look at will be Psalms by David. And I think that that's appropriate as well, since David was a man after God's own heart, understanding that that does not mean that he was a man like God's own heart. I think a lot of people listen to that and hear that he was a man after God's own heart, thinking that means that David was like or likened to or had a heart like God's. That's not what that means. It's the after as in running after. This is a man who was going after God's heart. So understand that's where intimacy comes. It's in our race to get to know God, and then understanding that He already knows you, and the depths at which He knows you do not preclude His great, intense love for you. And if we can get to that, then we can then build that intimate relationship with Him. So in starting this series, I wanted to just kind of do an introduction in terms of worship. And the psalm that we're going to look at this week is Psalm 63. So if you have your Bibles and you want to run with me there, it is Psalm 63. Let me just do a little commercial here for just a second. As with every series that I do, there are downloadable PDFs that are available on my website at debwaterbury.com, Deb Waterbury, all one word, .com. And if you go to the store, and then in the store, there's a little thing that says downloadables. If you hit downloadables, you'll find a section there for finding intimacy with God. And if you click there, you'll be able to get the downloadable PDFs that are the Bible study that go with this. This is a part of the journey, isn't it? If we want to get intimate with God, we got to get to know Him, and the way you get to know Him is diving into God's Word. So all the PDFs for these studies are available at debwaterbury.com. So we're starting with Psalm 63, and this first week I called it Seeing God and Seeking God in Worship. The title is Seeing God in Our Worship, but I think we also seek God in our worship. You know, I've heard a lot of people recently, and I guess I hear it all the time, I'm sure y'all do too, that complain about, worship at church, or complain about they just don't feel the spirit in church, or they're having a hard time feeling, and this is the phrase I hear often, ushered into the spirit while they're in church. And so they are using that often as sometimes an excuse to leave church, or sometimes just an excuse to complain about church, saying that there's this idea that there's a responsibility of the leadership and the church service and the people who are singing and whatever to bring the Spirit to you. so that, you have that ushered in and you feel that closeness to God. Well, David, and understand too that David is at this place here where he is, he's written Psalm 63 when if you look at the title, it says a Psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. Now, David would never have expected. Now, he's not in church right here, is he? He is in the wilderness. And he's out running. And some people thought he was running from Saul at this time. This was actually written later on in his kingship. So this is most likely written when he was running from his own son, Absalom, when Absalom had tried to overthrow and he had to run for his life. He's running from his own son, and people are talking bad about him, and stuff's happening. So he's writing this psalm and worshiping God in the midst of all of this trouble and pain and sorrow. Nobody's ushering in the Spirit for him right now. For David, worship was something different, I think, than what we have maybe sometimes allowed it to be here. And I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on how David sees worship so that we can maybe understand that our proclivity often to judge church service or judge our experiences in church by whether or not we feel the Spirit in church. Because let me tell you something, where two or more are gathered together, God says there He is. So the spirits are there. The Spirit is there with you in your church service. Whether or not you feel that, whether or not you feel that intimate relationship with God really is determined by your attitude about worship, not what everybody else is doing for you. And David knew that. And I think there's some things that we can see from this. If you're at Psalm 63, you know that the very first thing he writes here is, "Oh God, you are my God." Again, remembering that David is in the wilderness right now, running from his own son who wants to kill him. And David says, first thing he does is just enter into this moment of worshiping God by saying, "You are my God." Ownership, that intimate relationship had already been established with David. Now, I'm understanding the torment that David was in just simply because he has his own son coming after him. But we can see something really important here about David. David is seeking after God, and he's seeking after God knowing that he has this relationship already established. And when he says, "Oh God, you are my God," he really is echoing part of what had been told to Abraham about this relationship that had been dictated to Abraham and that we all now have. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 7, God had said to Abraham, "And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you." So David has established this foundational relationship with God that's based on the covenant relationship God had with Abraham. And David still sees that no matter what's happening in his life, and he's in a bad place right now. We're gonna study quite a few Psalms where David's in a really bad place, and we think that we have it hard. You can't even imagine running for your life from your own son. The things that this man has had to go through, and yet he already knew what it was to seek after God. So when David starts to call out to God this way, he's reaffirming. Because, if you look at what he says here, I want to just read a couple of verses here. "Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you." Now, thirsting after God, that's a big deal. When you have a thirst, this is what Charles Spurgeon said this about having a thirst. He said, "Thirst is an insatiable longing after that which is one of the most essential supports of life. There's no reasoning with it. There's no forgetting it, no despising it, no overcoming it by stoical indifference. Thirst will be heard." And David is literally saying that is how he's looking to God. And then Spurgeon went on to say this, "Even thus, it is with that divine desire which the grace of God creates in regenerate men. Only God Himself can satisfy the craving of a soul really aroused by the Holy Spirit." So let me take just a second here. It's a short psalm, so let me read it. And then just quickly, I've got a couple of things I want to talk to you about seeking after God in worship in this kind of way. So Psalm 63, I'm reading from the English Standard Version. "A psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek after you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I've looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory, because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. When I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword, but they shall be a portion for jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouths of liars will be stopped. So, David, as I said, he's in the wilderness here, but he is seeking after God in this kind of worship. Our worship, when you go to church, is to be about seeking after God, not having someone serve you enough so that you feel like you can feel God. So this is, I think this is the misconception that we've entered into so often in our church services, is that we sit there and wait to feel something. And then if you don't feel it, if the music's not pretty enough, the message isn't good enough, if it's too loud, too soft, too cold, too hot, person's next to you is talking, the person behind you is talking, the person in front of you sings terribly, whatever's happened, you fought with somebody on the way in, you don't like what the pastor's wearing, you don't like the songs that are being sung, you wish they were singing more hymns, you wish they were singing less hymns, I could name a billion things I've heard. We sit and we come into the pew, we sit down in the seat in church, and we wait to have someone bring us a feeling. And if we don't get that feeling ushered to us on a silver platter, we say the Spirit has not been in that church, or that has left, or that it's not a Spirit-filled church. So what we need to understand is what David understood. And that is, you have a relationship with God, and you find that intimacy with Him as you worship Him in seeking after Him. When you go to church, it should be all times, every time during the day, but especially when you're in church, you're not going there to be served. You're going there to seek after God. And you seek after God by worshiping Him. And so David is looking for comfort from this God that is his, and he does so by praising Him, by worshiping who God is. Our worship has to be about seeking God. Now understand that David doesn't need an altar. He doesn't need all that stuff. And notice this is what David doesn't say. Because I feel close to you, and the music uplifted me, and the pastor taught me, and you have blessed me, I will praise you. That's not what he says at all. What David says is, because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. His praise is about the character of God. His praise is about what he knows of God. He has that intimate relationship because he knows who God is, and therefore he praises Him. In short, David is expressing that nothing satisfies him, nor does he need anything more than intimate relationship with God, and that is in his worship. David is remembering who God is as he's worshiping. This is what we're to do. It's what you do in songs, the pastor does when he's teaching you. And when you want comfort, this is what you do. You find comfort in those times. If you're looking for intimacy with God, and I know that we all are, if you're looking for that relationship where you know He's there and you need to feel Him there, let me tell you something, you need to worship Him. As I was, not long ago, I was looking for an answer to a problem that I had. I had this big dilemma in front of me. Wasn't sure what to do. And I had, prayed and prayed and prayed and asked all kinds of people, and I just couldn't get to it. And I sat down with a good friend of mine, and I was pouring my heart out to her, and she looked at me and said, Deb, you need to turn everything off, and tomorrow morning, just worship. She said, just get on your face and worship God. You're going to hear Him. And I hadn't really thought of that, which was sad. I hadn't. But the next morning, that's exactly what I did. I didn't do all the, beseeching and the praying and the reading the Word, although those things are very good. I needed to be in intimate relationship with God so that I could hear Him. And I did that in worship. So I got down on my face and I began to worship Him. And do you know, it was only a few minutes before I heard the answer to what I needed. It was so quick. I could hear Him so quickly because I was worshiping. So I wanted to start this here because I think our intimacy that we need will be found as we tell God how amazing He is, and we worship Him simply for who He is, and knowing that that's what we're supposed to do in church and every single minute of every single day. I think this is going to be a great series that is going to help us understand that intimacy with God is not something that you have to get. It's something that you already have. It's just a matter of accessing it. And so we have to just realize what that looks like. I'm going to pray for you. I know that y'all are praying for me, and I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to this series, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time on Get Real with Deb Waterbury. Love you. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Get Real with Deb Waterbury. I hope you were blessed, and I hope you got some information that's going to help you get through your day. If you want any more information on any of my books or my articles or on any of my future speaking engagements, you can find all that information at debwaterbury.com. God bless you.